A millionaire suddenly walked into his mansion, and what he saw froze him on the spot. His newborn baby boy was halfway inside the mouth of a washing machine, while the maid was holding him close. At first glance, it looked terrifying. But when the truth came out, everything changed forever. Friends, this unbelievable story will leave you shocked, so make sure you watch the video till the very end. Don't forget to give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's get started. The Harrington house sat on a rise above the Hudson, all glass and limestone catching the last of the winter sun. From the road, it looked like a museum. From inside, on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, it felt like a place that survived on schedules and silence. Imani Brooks balanced a wicker basket of warm towels on her hip and nudged the laundry room door open with her elbow. She had been a preschool aide before her mother's stroke forced her into the steadier pay of housekeeping. Children, mess, and the small logic of their moods were her second language. 8-month-old Miles Harrington, a recent master of the army crawl, had already made a beeline from his playmat to the gleaming front-loading washer the way moths find porch lights. "Explorer," Imani teased, lowering the basket and crouching to his level. "That's not a cave. That's where socks get lost." She had unplugged the machine after breakfast, same as every morning. The plug sat visible on top of the counter, the cord looped and clipped. The washer door had a rubber stopper wedged against its hinge, so it couldn't close. Mrs. Kwan, the estate manager, had laughed the first time she saw Imani's setup. But she didn't laugh when Miles went from fussy to fascinated for whole stretches of the day. In an hour, the night nurse would arrive, and the evening staff would take over. In that small window, Imani could fold towels and keep Miles content without the soundtrack of his impatient growls. Miles pressed both palms to the cold glass, fog blooming under his hands, delighted by the mirror of his own open-mouthed grin. He rocked back, planted his knees, and tried to pull himself upright, legs quivering with effort. Imani hovered, one hand hovering an inch from his ribcage, the other ready to catch his head if he wobbled. "There you go. Big guy," she coached, voice low and rhythmic. "Push, push, push," he slid, giggling, and Imani caught him under the arms. He was all warm weight and milk breath. To turn the near miss into a game, she exaggerated a gasp. "Sir Miles ventures into the dragon's lair." The boy squealed as she guided his little belly half onto the lip of the empty drum, her forearm a safety bar across him, fingers braced on the rubber gasket. His legs kicked the air in triumph. He thumped the steel with one open palm, delighted by the hollow thud. The stopper kept the door lodged open like a mouth stuck mid-yawn. Imani exaggerated a tug, pretending the washer had him. "Oh no, the lair wants to keep you. Pull, pull, pull." He shrieked with laughter, the kind of pure belly-deep glee that had been scarce since his mother's photo disappeared from the hallway table, and the house began speaking in hushes. He arched his back, and Imani eased him out, hugging him close and kissing the fuzz behind his ear, until the squeals softened into high, hiccuping sighs. "Better?" she murmured. "It's a long day for small people." In the hallway, a grandfather clock told 3:30. The rest of the house ticked on in that reliable way. Pool pump humming outside, the HVAC whispering, the distant clink of someone restocking crystal in the dining room. Somewhere a phone buzzed and stopped. Imani set Miles on the thick rug and handed him a soft cloth book, then folded towels with the speed of someone who had learned to race the spaces between naps. She told herself she wouldn't think about the letter in her coat pocket, the overdue notice with the red bar, the total circled twice. She told herself she wouldn't think about the call she'd have to make to the rehab center, about her mother's therapy hours. She focused instead on the simple glory of a baby who was no longer fussy. She hummed, the old church tune that always smoothed the edges of her day, and Miles bounced on his hands in a rhythm that almost matched it. The front door opened. Imani didn't hear it. The laundry room sat off a side corridor near the mudroom, far from the formal foyer, and the washer's drum made a shell of the sound around them. She did feel a draft slip under the door, a shift in the air that made the baby pause and look up. He made a questioning sound, "Eh?" and then, reassured by the familiar human in front of him, returned to smacking the cloth book, as if interrogating it. Boot soles struck limestone, one set not the double tap of the security detail. No announcement from Mrs. Kwan, no text on the staff thread. Someone crossed the hall with a purposeful stride, past the gallery of modern art and the black steel stair. Cole Harrington had not planned to come home. The board meeting that should have run until dinner had imploded at noon, one vote going sideways, and a competitor making noise in the press. He had told the driver to head to the office. The driver, cautious about the state of his boss's eyes and the way his jaw worked, pulled the car toward home instead. Cole realized it only when the car turned up the private road and the trees opened onto the long drive. He considered telling the driver to reroute. He didn't. He wanted to see what the house felt like when nobody expected him. Since Nora's funeral, the rooms had become postcards he passed through. Beautiful and flat, addressed to a version of himself who no longer lived here. He had tripled the staff. He had called in every favor to secure the best night nurse, the best pediatrician, the best developmental specialist to evaluate whether grief could curdle a baby's brain. He had not learned how to be alone in a room with his son without making a list. Now, unexpectedly, the house was breathing. Somewhere, someone was singing under their breath. Not a radio, not the playlists the dining staff put on while they polished silver. A human voice, low and steady, the way you sing when only one person in the world is listening. He followed it down the side hall. Imani slid the last stack of towels into the cabinet and turned, just in time to see Miles's elbows dig into the rug as he launched himself back toward the washer with the fearlessness of infants and cliff divers. "Speedy," she warned, lunging and catching his waistband. "Not without your spotter." He laughed and grabbed for the rubber ring. She wedged her forearm snug across his middle again, his weight secure and the angle shallow, and made a comical show of battling the dragon. From the doorway, a shadow darkened the floor. She didn't register it. Miles did, twisting to track the movement, his mouth rounding with interest. "What?" a man's voice said, too controlled to be calm. "Is going on?" Imani's spine went cold even before she turned. Cole Harrington filled the doorframe. Tall charcoal suit, overcoat slung over one forearm, a face built to look composed on magazine covers currently failing at its job. His eyes snapped to the unplugged cord on the counter, the stopper jamming the door, the nest of warm towels, the baby's bare feet bicycling happily in the air, and then back to the single image his brain had seized, his son's tiny torso, half inside steel. Imani tightened her hold on Miles without thinking, instinct gathering all at once in her body, the way you brace in a sudden storm. "Mr. Harrington," she said, voice steady by practice, "he's safe. The machine is off. It's unplugged. I'm right here." Cole crossed the room in 3 long strides, polished Oxfords hard on tile. He wasn't shouting. He didn't have to. The force in him came from something deeper than volume. Fear always did. "Get him out," he said, and it left no room for interpretation. Imani pulled Miles back immediately and hoisted him to her chest, one hand supporting his diapered bottom, the other folded up between his shoulder blades, the way you do when your body becomes a dock and the child a boat that must be tied fast. Miles startled at the change in energy and made a wounded, breathless sound, the question mark of a baby who isn't sure whether to laugh or cry. "Shh, buddy," she soothed, rocking, cheek to his soft crown. "You're okay." Cole stopped a foot away. Up close, the exhaustion around his eyes was a soft bruise. He smelled like cold air and cologne and an entire day of coffee. He held his hands a little out from his sides, as if ready to take the child or catch him or lift the roof off the house. He didn't seem sure which. His gaze flicked from Miles's face to Imani's arms, to the machine's open mouth and back, triaging in fractions of seconds. "Do you think this is appropriate?" His voice sat on the edge of breaking and refused to. "Do you—" He cut himself off, swallowing something raw. "I come home and my son is—" He gestured toward the drum as if the word itself might do harm if spoken. Kimani heard the hurt, not just the anger, and answered that, not the accusation. "He was fussy," she said quietly, in the precise factual tone she used with first-time parents and anxious toddlers. "He likes the cool glass and the echo. I never let go. The door can't close." She tilted her head toward the stopper without shifting her grip. "He's safe." Miles extended one fist toward Cole, fingers opening and closing in the baby sign for want. The tiny gesture tugged hard at something in Cole's chest. He stepped forward and Imani, reading the moment, adjusted, letting the boy sling one arm toward his father, while keeping his weight anchored. Miles patted at Cole's tie, grabbed it, and gummed the silk at the corner like a claim. The absurdity of it, this ridiculous little human drooling on a tie that had impressed senators, made a sound rise in Cole's throat that might have been a laugh in gentler weather. He didn't laugh. He looked at Imani instead, the janitor's closet of his heart filled suddenly with crash-tumbled objects, images of headlines. The way grief can become negligence if you squint wrong, the long, lonely hallways he had paid people to populate because he did not know how. "Tell me," he said at last, each word sharp enough to cut the quiet in two. "Tell me exactly what you were doing with my son." Imani didn't flinch. She shifted Miles higher on her hip, kept her palm spread broad across his back so his breathing stayed even, and answered the way she would to a worried parent at the preschool. He was fussy after nap. The cool glass and the echo calm him. "The washer is unplugged, cords on the counter. The door is blocked open with a stopper so it can't swing shut." My arm stayed under his chest the whole time. No weight on the drum, no closing door, no hands off. It looks worse than it is. He was laughing because I made it a game so he wouldn't cry. Cole's gaze cut to each thing she named. The looped cord, the rubber wedge, the washed pile of towels still radiating faint heat. He looked back at Miles. The boy's fist had found Cole's tie again. Tiny fingers worked the silk like it was a secret puzzle. When Cole tried to ease the tie free, Miles protested with a single wounded syllable that sounded almost like "da." It hit with the force of a falling beam. Imani softened her voice. "He wants you close." "You can take him, sir." Cole hesitated as if the child might shatter in the handover. Imani made the transfer easy, his weight angled to Cole's forearm. Imani's hand still bracing between tiny shoulder blades until Cole's second hand settled. The moment Miles realized he was locked into that big chest, his body gave a little sigh. He gummed the lapel now instead of the tie. Cole clutched too tight. Imani noticed. "Lower your shoulders," she coached gently. "He reads the tension. If you breathe, he breathes." Cole wasn't used to taking instruction in his own house. He tried anyway. In-breath, out-breath, the rhythm caught. Miles's fists unclenched. Footsteps approached at a trot. Mrs. Kwan, the estate manager, appeared in the doorway with a tablet tucked under one arm and concern on her face. "Mr. Harrington, oh, you're home early. Everything all right?" Imani didn't move, wanting Cole to answer from inside the moment, not above it. Cole kept his eyes on Miles, then spoke without the bark he used in boardrooms. "I walked in on a scene that looked—" The muscles in his jaw fluttered. "Wrong. It looked wrong." Mrs. Kwan's gaze swept the unplugged cord, the stopper, the baby now content. Something like pride flickered across her face. "Mr. Harrington, you know Imani's protocols. She took that infant safety course I asked for, passed it with full marks. She's the reason we installed the stove knob guards and the magnetic locks in the butler's pantry." "I told you, she's meticulous." Imani flushed. He was minutes from a meltdown. The washer echo is his favorite. "But if you never want him near this room again, I'll change our route. I'll set up a sensory corner in the family room. Mirror tiles, a soft drum, a silicone pull toy. He can get the same sounds without appliances." Cole looked like a man translating a foreign language. He processed the word meltdown, then sensory. The words made a map he didn't have. "My wife." He started and then stopped. The name didn't come out. He tried again from another angle. "I don't know what 8-month-olds need." Imani nodded like he'd given her the combination to a safe. "They need people more than things. Faces, voice. A place to push and fail and try again." As if in agreement, Miles shoved one small heel against Cole's stomach and tried to stand on air. Cole, startled, tightened again. Immaculate instincts ran into zero practice. "Here," Imani said. She stepped closer, and with permission in her eyebrows placed 2 fingers inside the crook of Cole's elbow. "Tuck him in like this so his core is supported. Now let him lean out just a little to push with his legs. He'll feel like he's doing it, but your forearm is the floor," Cole followed. Miles grunted with the effort, managed a miniature stand on his father's arm and lit up. A sound, half laugh, half crow, burst out of him. It landed between them like light finding a crack. Cole's phone vibrated. The screen flashed a board member's name, then the name of an investigative reporter. He let it go. On the next buzz, his thumb hovered. He let that go too. He didn't look at Imani, but she saw it. The smallest rebellion against the entire machine of his life. "Let's get him out of the laundry room," she suggested softly. "New places, new feelings." He'll associate this room with your energy now. Family room's better, Cole nodded. Mrs. Kwan stepped back, relief smoothing her features. I'll send housekeeping to install the baby gate on this doorway, she said. And I'll have Rudy bring up the sensory bin from storage. They made a slow procession down the hall, Imani at Cole's shoulder in case his grip slipped. Cole walking like a man carrying a glass bowl filled too high. Miles narrating in happy syllables that meant everything and nothing. The family room was sunlight and low furniture, a basket of picture books, a foam mat that looked like expensive clouds. Imani knelt and spread a square of mat, then set out a simple constellation of objects, a silicone feather with holes to pull through, a soft drum that went thump without ringing, 2 mirror tiles that caught the room's warm light. On the floor? Cole asked, uncertain. On the floor, she confirmed. Take off your jacket. You'll be less stiff. He'll read that too. He shrugged the wool off his shoulders. It felt more like shrugging out of a roll than a garment. He sat, then stretched his legs out in a V the way she did. Miles, placed between his knees, immediately lunged for the mirror tile. He met his own face, startled into a delighted, "Oh, he loves faces," Imani said. "Especially his and yours." She tapped the mirror lightly and let her reflection boop his nose. He tried to boop back and hit his forehead gently. She didn't flinch. "Oops, that's okay. We learn where our bodies are this way." Cole watched her, then tried the same motion. Boop! Miles squealed and grabbed his father's finger. Thought it was ridiculous how pleased the sound made him. "My wife." Cole tried again, and this time the name came quiet as if spoken in a church. Nora. She had a complicated delivery. Then the weeks after. He stared at the mat. I kept thinking if I threw resources at the problem, I could fix it. Doctors, specialists, nurses. I didn't learn. He looked up, honest like a man alone on a ledge. Any of this. Imani settled on her heels. Grief chews time, she said simply. And babies don't care who's in the room as long as someone is. You're here now, he swallowed. For the record, he said, and made himself meet her eyes. I'm sorry I came in hot. I saw a picture that scared me and I reacted. But I shouldn't have spoken to you like that. Imani gave him the out and the accountability in one nod. Fear makes pictures bigger, she said. We can write new ones. Rule if you want it. No games with appliances. I can live with that. Rule taken, Cole said quickly. No appliances ever. Then we're good, she said, and meant it. Miles banged the soft drum with ferocious pride. The dull thump seemed to reset the air. Imani passed Cole a cloth book. Read, slow cadence. He'll chew half the pages. That's part of it. Cole opened the book like it might have a trap inside, then found the first page. Brown bear, brown bear! His voice was rough from disuse, but steadied when Miles reached and patted the bear. By the green frog, the rhythm had settled. By the yellow duck, Miles's eyelids were heavy. By the white dog, he had collapsed into the warm curve of Cole's leg and dozed with one palm splayed against his father's knee. They sat in that new quiet for a long minute. It wasn't the museum hush the house specialized in. It was the hush that follows being fed exactly what you need. Imani kept her voice low. He fights naps until he wins. If you pivot him to your chest, he'll sleep 20, maybe 30. That buys you time to answer 1 or 2 of those calls. If they can wait, they should. Cole's mouth twitched. You running my calendar now? Just protecting your asset, she said, unblinking. Him, he didn't argue. He slid a hand under Miles's torso and brought him up the way she'd showed him, cheek to his collarbone. The baby made a soft sound and burrowed closer. Cole sat very still, as if afraid breath might break the spell. His phone buzzed again. He silenced it with one thumb and with the other hand typed a quick message to his assistant. Pushing meetings. Be home by 6 all week. Block out bedtime. He set the phone face down. Imani stood careful as a cat so the floor wouldn't creak. I'll put a plan on the counter for the sensory corner. Items we have, 2 we should order. And I'll email you his current routine. Wake windows, bottles, nap lengths, what calms him, what winds him up. If you want changes, tell me. We'll do it together. Together, Cole repeated, testing the word as if it were heavier than it looked. He glanced at her coat hanging by the mudroom, at the corner of an envelope peeking from the pocket with a red stripe he knew too well. He didn't comment, not yet. There were kinds of help that felt like handouts and kinds that felt like being on a team. He was learning the difference. Mrs. Kwan reappeared like a benevolent ghost. She set a small kettle on the bar cart warmer and a mug beside it. Chamomile, she whispered, nodding at Cole's chest. For after. Cole surprised himself by smiling. Thank you, Connie. She blinked at the use of her first name, then smiled back. You're welcome, Cole. Imani moved to the laundry room alone, coiled the unplugged cord back into its loop, removed the rubber stopper, and slipped it into a drawer marked Misc Safety, and closed the washer door with a firm click, turning an old picture into a finished page. She washed her hands, dried them, and stood in the doorway of the family room for one more second. On the couch, a billionaire sat in his shirt sleeves with a sleeping baby pressed to his heart, reading the last 2 pages of a children's book in a whisper meant for one pair of ears. There was a shift in the room you could almost taste, like winter light deciding it might be spring after all. Imani wrote the sensory plan in neat block letters at the kitchen island, added a note beneath it, no washer room play, got it and slid it under a magnet shaped like a blue whale. When she looked up, Cole was watching her from the sofa with something gentler than thanks. It looked like trust beginning. Dinner at 6, he said quietly. Can you stay late and show me the bedtime routine? I can, she said. We'll keep it simple. Bath bottle, book, bed, and your hands. He likes your hands, Cole nodded. My hands, he echoed, as if committing the words to a contract. Outside, the river kept moving. Inside, the house finally felt like a place where a boy could learn to stand. Evelyn Marks's voice carried that calm steel people acquired after 30 years of telling rooms full of men what they didn't want to hear. You had a day, she said. You handled it. Now use it. Cole put the phone on speaker and left it on the kitchen island between him and Imani, as if the conversation belonged to all 3 of them. Use it how? Tomorrow morning I'm convening an emergency strategy session with HR and legal, Evelyn said. At 9 we brief the board. At noon we announce a company-wide caregiver policy shift, paid leave that actually pays, predictable scheduling for hourly workers, childcare stipends, on-site infant rooms at regional hubs. Cole looked at Imani. She didn't blink. He said, do it. I'm not asking for a quote, Evelyn replied. I'm asking for you. People will assume this is PR. It won't be if it costs us. You need to put your name on it and your money behind it. It will look like I'm leveraging my kid, Cole said. I'm not putting Miles in any video. I'm not asking you to, Evelyn said. I'm asking you to say 3 sentences on the record that other men in your position refuse to say. I was scared. My caregiver kept my child safe. We're changing how we support families here. Imani's eyes flicked to Cole's and held. He exhaled. I'll be there. Not at headquarters, Evelyn said. Here, we'll do it in your library, small crew, no baby on camera. This needs to feel like work, not a set. Tonight, rest. Tomorrow we build something we should have built 5 years ago. She paused. And Cole, let your people talk. The woman who kept your son safe, if she's willing, put her on the advisory group. Pay her for the expertise you already benefit from for free. Imani's eyebrow rose. Cole heard the nudge inside the line. We'll talk at 9, he said. They ended the call. The island hummed with the quiet after a storm. Imani reached for her tote. If I'm going to sound like I know what I'm talking about in front of your board, I need to call my mother to check in and get 8 minutes with a pen. Call from here, Cole said. And not in front of a sink, sit. She sat at the end of the island and thumbed her phone. Ma, it's me. She slipped into the register that only children use with their mothers. I'm coming by tomorrow if Mr. Harrington doesn't need me in the morning. Therapy okay. No, the lady with the bun is nice. She's not judging your ankles. She listened, smiled, and softened. Okay, I love you more. When she hung up, Cole said, what would you build if you could write checks without counting? Wages, Imani said and waited until he nodded. Plus, a predictable schedule for the people who can't make babysitters stretch. Emergency leave that doesn't make anyone choose between rent and a pediatrician. A childcare stipend that does not phase out right when you need it most. On-site infant rooms at office hubs, yes, but also partnerships with neighborhood centers for people who don't work in pretty buildings. Training stipends for caregivers to take infant CPR and child development, and a policy that stops penalizing people for saying they have a life. Put it in writing. Put it in writing, he repeated, opening his notes app like a junior staffer. Keep going. And if you want to be brave, she said, make it apply to contractors too. The people who clean your bathrooms, not just the ones who sign your bonus checks. "That's not brave," he said. "That's overdue." Miles stirred on the monitor, coughed and woke with that glassy, unhappy cry of a baby whose fever remembered its job. The rest of the evening blurred into choreographed care. Dose, cuddle, cool cloth. A ragged lullaby Cole hummed off key because Imani told him that babies didn't grade on pitch. At 1:17 a.m., the temperature crept to 101.9 and hovered like a dare. The pediatrician on call advised what to do, voice gentle with the confidence of someone who'd walked hundreds of parents through worse nights. By 2:03, the numbers inched down. At 2:40, Miles slept, one palm on Cole's throat as if he could feel the hum of a vow. Dawn came pewter and then silver. Connie set coffee on a tray without comment and lined up glasses of water like soldiers. Imani arrived in jeans and a navy sweater, hair pulled back, tote upgraded to a backpack with a binder inside. She surveyed the family room like a general. Soft bookshelf straight, mirror tiles clean, thermometer ready. Infant drops set aside with the cap loose enough for a one-handed dose. At 8:27, a discreet crew carried 2 cameras into the library and clicked soft lights on. No cables where feet would go. No boom mics, nothing that would make a house with a baby feel like a stage. Evelyn arrived in a slate jacket and sensible shoes. The only concession to theatre, a swipe of lipstick that made her look like the world's most competent aunt. "Ground rules," she said, before anyone sat. "No baby on camera. We don't shoot anyone who doesn't consent. We don't sand the truth smooth. If you say wages and some PR person tries to swap benefits, I will personally erase the euphemisms." Imani liked her more in that minute than she had liked any executive in years. Legal and HR took chairs at the far end of the table. The general counsel, a precise woman named Reese, opened a laptop. "We drafted 4 planks," she said. "Paid family leave up to 16 weeks at full pay for primary caregivers, 10 weeks for secondary. Predictable scheduling with 2 weeks' notice or premium pay. A monthly childcare stipend up to age 3. Income agnostic. And a commitment to build on-site infant rooms at 6 hubs in 12 months. Imani raised a hand halfway. Not timid, not aggressive. "Who counts as family?" Reese blinked. "Parent, guardian, spouse, domestic partner. Add caregiver of record," Imani said. "The aunt who raises the baby. The cousin who stepped up. Put it in plain English. People who need this shouldn't need a lawyer to qualify," Reese typed. "Add contractor coverage," Cole said. "That's complex," HR began. "That's what it means," Evelyn cut in, "for this not to be PR. Silence." Then HR typed too. They wrote the 5th plank together at the table because the gap was too obvious to ignore. A training stipend and paid time for infant CPR, child development and de-escalation, available to any employee or contractor who provided care. Imani asked for one more clause. Explicit protection from retaliation for speaking up about safety. Reese looked at her, considered the case they were not talking about, and wrote, "No employee or contractor shall face adverse action for making a good faith report or refusal of unsafe practices in childcare settings." "Make it big," Evelyn said, and the words went bold on the screen. They rehearsed nothing. At 9, the board logged into a secure video call, faces arranged in a grid, the friendly ones first, then the watchful, then the 1 or 2 who looked put upon by the presence of sleep-deprived humanity. Cole didn't open with metrics. He opened with 10 sentences that did the thing Evelyn had asked: fear named, care acknowledged, power pointed at policy. He did not cry. Imani watched the place in his throat, where tears would have shown if he were a different kind of man in a different kind of room. He finished with, "This costs money. We're spending it." He looked at the CFO's square. "We'll show you where we'll cut to fund it. I recommend we start with the optics budget." "Do you mean marketing?" the CFO asked, half joking. "I mean the money we spend on looking like we care," Cole said, not joking. "We're going to spend it on caring." Imani saw Evelyn's mouth tilt with the smallest flicker of pride. The vote was not unanimous, but it was swift. The old guard didn't fight. They simply took notes on a column of numbers that had grown new teeth. At noon, Cole sat in the library chair again and read the statement to a company-wide live stream that bled into the public within minutes. He said wages without a flinch, contractors without a cough, caregiver, as if the syllables had always been his. He thanked the people in this house who keep my son safe and this household human. He didn't say Imani's name because they had agreed she would speak for herself in her own time, as a paid advisor, not as someone being showcased. Then he stepped away from the camera and let HR take the questions that came hot and grateful and hostile in equal measure. An analyst on cable called it expensive virtue. A nurse on a breakroom TV said, "About time." A janitor at a regional branch texted his wife, "We're going to make it." Imani did not watch the punditry. She watched the baby. Miles's fever stayed in the low range and slid down the thermometer with the lazy curve of a body, deciding not to fight anymore. She recorded the numbers, noted the doses, and answered Lena's texts with practical emojis: a check mark for medicine, a droplet for water, a cloud for nap. At 2:15, Connie walked in with her phone raised. "The ledger updated," she said. The new headline read, "After viral scare, Harrington Bank announces Nora initiative for family support. Subhead caregiver input-shaped policy." The first quote belonged to Cole. The second, lifted from a background call, belonged to Imani. "Don't make it look nice. Make it work." The house felt less like it was defending itself and more like it had moved on to building. That, of course, was when the past knocked. The doorbell chimed in the quiet way expensive houses announce storms. Connie appeared in the doorway, unflappable veneer showing a hairline crack. "Ms. Margot Pierce is here," she said softly. "She says she's the baby's maternal grandmother." Imani felt the old stutter under her ribs. Cole stood in a way that was half welcome, half bracing. "Show her in." Margot Pierce came in like winter on a good coat. Severe, elegant grief made into posture. Her eyes were the exact blue of the river under slate clouds. She took Miles in with one look that no camera could replicate. A grandmother inventorying all the things she could fix and all the things she couldn't. Then her gaze landed on Imani and held. "I read the article," Margot said to Cole without hello. "I read the follow-up. Her voice caught. She started again with a new word. "I am furious that strangers got to that moment before I did." "I should have called you last night," Cole said. "That's on me." "Yes," she said evenly. Then she took a step toward him, and to Imani's surprise placed one palm over her son-in-law's heart, where a baby's hand had rested all night. "And I am proud of you today." "Don't make me say it twice." The hand dropped. The steel came back. "I need to see where my grandson sleeps." Imani led her to the nursery and did not apologize for the blackout shade or the crib with its bare expanse like a Zen garden. She narrated without defensiveness, the monitor, the temperature, the emergency numbers on the wall. Margot pinched the corner of the fitted sheet with 2 fingers, the way women in some families check for precision, and found it tight enough to make her mouth relax a millimeter. Back in the family room, Margot stood a beat in front of the sensory corner, as if reading a foreign alphabet. She pointed at the mirror tiles. "He likes those?" "He loves faces," Imani said. "Mostly yours and his father's. Sometimes mine." Margot's eyes flashed to Cole's, then to the baby. Something in her shoulders lowered by a hair. "I brought documents," she said, switching to the language of people who control outcomes with paper. She slid a thin folder from her bag. "Nora's will included a clause about the appointment of a guardian if you became unable to parent, Cole. I don't intend to invoke it. I am invoking a different clause. Wherever possible, we will build a village." She turned to Imani. "And villages have lines. You are not family. You are also clearly not replaceable." She let that sit. "I will not have my daughter's son raised by rotating strangers. If you're staying, I want a contract, not charity. I want you paid what you just told a camera you believed. I want boundaries that protect us all. And I want a voice at the table where those boundaries are set." Imani absorbed the blow, and the compliment layered into one. "I'm an employee," she said. "I don't sit at tables." "You do now," Margot said with the authority of old money repurposed. "And you will be paid for every hour you spend at them." Cole glanced at Imani, then at Evelyn's card on the counter, then back. "Done," he said. "We'll draft it today. Advisory council with authority over safety policies in this house and a clear chain of command. Compensation at a professional rate. Retaliation clause," he looked at Imani, "in writing." Imani nodded once. "And a clause that says, no one gets to use a child's image without unanimous consent," she added, thinking of cameras and strangers and the way a second can be ripped from its context. House rule and family rule. Margot's mouth softened again. I thought you might say that, she said. It's in the folder. They sat, unlikely triangle again, and went through the paper until the edges didn't feel like blades. When they were done, Margot stood and, without invitation, held out her arms for her grandson. Imani passed Miles over, with the motion she'd taught the boy's father. Weight angled, shoulder supported, hand braced until the second hand landed. The grandmother's body remembered how to be dock and boat at once. Miles considered her face, and finding something that matched a photo in his crib, offered a solemn, generous pat to her cheek. Margot closed her eyes around the touch. When she opened them, they were wet but not broken. Tomorrow, she said, echoing Cole's word from the night before. I'll come back tomorrow. We'll see if this village can hold. She left a smell of expensive soap and something older, a kitchen 30 years ago, a girl with a violin, a woman learning to be a different kind of mother than she had planned. The door closed softly. The house adjusted around the new shape she had made. Afternoon settled. Evelyn texted that the board vote had cleared with conditions. Cole's assistant sent 3 calendar holds labeled with a single word: bedtime. The ledger pushed a second addendum with the headline, Grandmothers Make the Best Auditors. The CPS caseworker on her private account wrote a comment she would later delete. Most families we visit don't have cameras. If you're fortunate enough to be seen, make it matter. In the late light, Cole and Imani took Miles to the rehab center to see Imani's mother. The elevator smelled like antiseptic and cinnamon gum. Ms. Brooks sat in a wheelchair by a window, hair wrapped in a scarf the color of plum, dignity arranged around pain like lace. She looked up, saw her daughter, then the tall man with the baby, and smiled the way people smile when a door opens they had forgotten was in the wall. This the famous boss? She asked, mischief in her voice's edges. Ma, Imani warned, fond. Ms. Brooks took in the baby, with eyes practiced at loving children that weren't hers. He's got that beloved look on him, she said. That's on y'all. Keep it there. Cole, who had presented to heads of state without sweating, found his mouth dry. He tried thanks. It came out as something truer. I'm learning, he said. Good, Ms. Brooks replied. The lesson sticks better when you learn tired. On the way out, Imani paid the therapy desk with her card and didn't hide it. Cole watched the swipe, the tiny wince at the number, the squared shoulders after. In the parking lot, he said, the raise hits on Friday. The stipend policy will take longer. So I'll cover the gap retroactively for your mother's therapy, once legal signs the language that says it's wages, not a gift. Imani looked at him for a full second, measuring. Okay, she said. With wages. With wages, he answered, and grinned despite himself. Back at the house, evening drew itself in. They did bath, bottle, book, bed as if rituals could write over fear, and sometimes they can. Cole read The Bear and the Frog and the Duck, then added a chapter from a thin book of poems that Nora had loved, his voice even and low in the darkened room. He did not say goodnight to a ghost. He said it to a boy and meant it. When the door clicked and the monitor hummed, his phone buzzed. A new message. An attorney for the contractor who'd taken the photo, claiming wrongful termination and hinting at additional footage. Cole handed the phone to Imani. We'll handle this tomorrow, he said. Like a man who finally understood that some things you don't schedule. Like love, like grief, still keep their own calendars. Tomorrow, Imani agreed, slinging her backpack onto one shoulder. Big day again. Stay for dinner, he said, then caught himself. If you want. If you're off the clock, I don't want to take it. I'll eat, she said, practical. Then I'll go home and sleep so I have words for your board in the morning. And you, she pointed at his chest where a baby's hand had claimed a country. Breathe, he breathed. The river moved dark under the last of the light. The house held. Somewhere inside it, a new kind of quiet took root. The kind that comes when people mean tomorrow and have a plan to reach it. By sunrise, the river ran bright steel, and the house hummed with a quiet industry that felt earned. Connie's checklist lived on the island. Doses logged, naps graphed, a column titled Tomorrow, with lines through half the items. Miles woke cool to the touch, chest warm, lips pink. He greeted the day with the husky whisper babies use after a long night, and then slapped his father's cheek as if to say, report for duty. The legal letter waited in Cole's inbox like a dare. At 8 Suga, the library filled, Reese from legal with a stack of tabs, Evelyn with a legal pad and a look that could move stalled trains, HR with a draft memo, Imani with a binder labeled in block letters, safety, wages, consent. Margot arrived unannounced and took a seat as if she'd always had one. She slid reading glasses onto her nose with a small click that signaled the end of pleasantries. Reese summarized. The contractor's attorney claims wrongful termination and suggests additional footage that will make yesterday's context look worse. She slid photos across the table. A still frame of Miles's belly near the stainless rim. The unplugged cord visible in the background if you knew to look for it. They're trying to force a settlement and a public backtrack. Cole didn't look at the picture. What closes the door without feeding the fire? 3 prongs, Reese said. First, we release the house footage with sensitive angles blurred. Door wedge, sign-in logs, timestamps, the 1-minute clip of the arm under the child. We control the context. Second, we roll out a hard consent policy for all vendors. No recording inside client homes, mandatory consent training, phones sealed in pouches upon entry. Third, we change our vendor contracts company-wide. Violation equals immediate termination with cause. Arbitration waived. That last prong will make enemies, HR said. That last prong keeps families safe, Evelyn replied. We didn't build all this to negotiate with people who point cameras at babies. Imani raised a hand halfway. Add a household rule posted at every entrance. No photography. No exceptions. Safety checks welcomed. Liability checks required. Put it where the FedEx guy can read it, Reese typed. Done. Compensation, Cole said, turning to Imani. Contract for advisory work in this house and at headquarters. Rate commensurate with professional consulting. Hours strict. Boundaries explicit. Imani opened her binder. I wrote it last night. She slid a draft across the table. Salaried wages for childcare. Separate hourly consulting rate. Overtime, PTO, health coverage. A retaliation clause. A line in heavy font. No household footage posted without unanimous consent of parents, guardians, and the advisory council. And a clause that says, I go home at 6 unless it's an actual emergency. People stay kind when they sleep, Margot's mouth tipped. Amen, they signed. The pens felt heavier than pens. Boundaries turned to ink have a way of unclenching rooms. At 10, Reese faced the contractor's attorney over video. We won't settle, she said without heat. Your client violated policy and recorded a private child. We have footage, logs, and an internal code that predates his employment. Withdraw your letter, or we file an injunction and refer the matter to state licensing. The attorney postured for a minute and then asked to confer. 30 minutes later, an email arrived. Claim withdrawn. Training mandated. Phones in pouches policy adopted. Cole didn't smile. He exhaled. At noon, the company live stream clicked on for a second day. This time it wasn't a speech. It was a town hall. A teller named Shonda took the mic and spoke about trading shifts 3 times a week to catch a 6 ULAM bus to the only daycare that would take her toddler. A security guard named Luis talked about sleeping in his car between night shift and nursery opening because his wife's mother had fallen. An IT contractor named Joy said plainly, I build your systems. I have never belonged to your policies. Today I do. HR detailed the Nora initiative in language that sounded like a human could use it. When questions turned to costs, Cole didn't pivot. We cut the optics budget, he said. We trimmed executive travel and a vanity build. We're selling the unused lake house. We're spending it on care. A silent wave pulsed through the chat. Emojis that weren't policy but felt like consent from the other end of the machine. At 2, the first Nora room opened at the downtown hub, a tucked-away suite with a glass vestibule, and a sign that read in simple font, Welcome Caregivers. No photos beyond this point. Inside, rocking chairs that didn't squeak, a sink at the right height, a mini fridge labeled by day, a soft corner with mirror tiles at floor level, a shelf of board books that had survived other babies' teeth, a lactation space with a lock and a table that folded out of the wall like a secret. Imani wandered the room with her advisor's checklist and felt something she hadn't let herself feel in years, pride that ran deeper than relief. She swapped a 2-bright bulb, adjusted a mat by 2 inches, and hung a laminated card on a hook. Who to call when the plan doesn't work. She added her cell beneath and then, in a small act of self-preservation, set ours next to it. The ledger posted another update, a profile, not a takedown. It quoted Evelyn, "Care is a system. PR is a slogan. Reese, we wrote the retaliation clause first." And a line from Imani that would be cut out and taped above break room microwaves. "Don't make it look nice, make it work." Comments were their usual weather. But threaded among them were stories, 30, then 300, of parents and aunties and big brothers who had been the village alone for too long. At home, the house adapted around habits that felt earned, rather than assigned. The nursery's blackout shade was raised an inch, because a sliver of river light had turned out to be the best nightlight. The laundry room door wore a baby gate with a latch that even Connie admired. The sensory corner in the family room collected small fingerprints like proof. Margot came with a folder again, but this time it held a check and a proposal. "The foundation will match your childcare stipend fund for a year," she told Cole. "And we'll endow 3 community centers on the south side with infant rooms that are better than the ones rich. Buildings get." She leveled him with a grandmother's clean look. "Families don't live in hubs, Cole. They live in neighborhoods." "Done," he said, and wrote a second line beneath. Company-paid slots prioritized for employees' families and neighborhood caregivers of record. Afternoon tipped into the kind of evening that offers choices. They chose work that looked like dinner. Lena arrived with 2 pizzas and a bag of sliced fruit. She kissed her nephew's head and her brother's forehead. "You look like a person," she informed Cole, which he accepted as the high compliment it was. Connie set plates. Timani cut grapes into quarters, with the speed of someone who had learned to do it while standing. They ate at the island without speeches. Halfway through, the doorbell rang again. Reese stood on the threshold with an envelope, and the kind of smile lawyers wear when they've done something clean. "The vendor consortium signed the consent code," she reported. "No phones, sealed pouches, consent training, third-party audits, and," she slid the envelope to Imani, "retroactive wage adjustments for in-home caregivers on our payroll from the last 12 months. Accounting finally learned the difference between gifts and wages." Imani turned the check over and didn't flinch at the number. She looked at Cole. "Thank you." "With wages," he said. "With wages," she echoed, and slid half mentally into a column marked Mars Therapy, then forced herself to breathe before the math could steal the moment. Bedtime returned like tide. Bath, bottle, book, bed. 4 beats that made a rhythm out of a house that had once been all echo. Cole's reading had smoothed into a cadence that put the reader to sleep as surely as the listener. Tonight, when he reached the Yellow Duck, Miles did not fight. He watched his father's mouth like a small scientist, then pressed his palm flat against Cole's collarbone, as if measuring the music under the skin. In the dark, Cole added 2 lines from Nora's slim book of poems, clear as water. "Nothing, Maudlin," and laid the boy down with the hand-over-hand retreat that had begun to feel like ritual more than trick. Outside the nursery, Margot was waiting. "Are you read like her?" she said quietly, not to turn the knife but to stitch the seam. "I thought I sounded like a broken engine," he said. She loved engines, Margot replied, which made him laugh, the kind of laugh that lets grief sit at the table without knocking plates over. The night did not end with speeches. It moved the way good nights do, politely, without drama, full of small errands that mean more than their parts. Connie loaded the dishwasher. Lena texted the family thread. He did bath without help. Ms. Brooks sent a selfie from rehab making a face at a terrible jello and a caption that read, "Tell that baby I got stronger." When the house had thinned to footsteps and the river hushed, Cole and Imani stood in the family room under a lamplight that made everything look honest. The binder lay open on the island, a pen set diagonally across a page. Cole rested one hand on it. "You changed my house," he said. "So you changed my company." "I changed diapers," she said, dry as a New England winter, then softer. "The rest you did because you could." He let that sit, then nodded to the monitor where a green dot blinked steady. "What do we build next?" "A boring day," she said. "Those are hard to come by. Tomorrow morning walk if the fever stays gone. Stop at my mother's so she can brag to the nurses. Lunch at home. A nap that actually happens where naps go. And at 2, she tapped the binder's calendar, We meet the contractor coalition to write the parent consent training. Write it like a person, not a pamphlet. If it sounds like HR, we throw it out and try again." He grinned. "Deal." Saturday came warm and windy. They drove to Ms. Brooks's neighborhood community center for a volunteer day that smelled like paint, lemon cleaner, and hope. The old infant room had been a closet with a rug. By sundown it had 3 cribs, 3 rocking chairs, a changing table with drawers that closed themselves, and a mural Imani and Lena painted from a photo on Margot's piano, Nora as a girl, arms thrown wide under a tree. Cole assembled the last crib, misfitting the rail twice, then getting it right with the stubborn competence of a man who had spent a lifetime putting together different kinds of structures and never once read the instructions. He wiped sweat with his sleeve and laughed when Imani told him it was a good look on a banker. The ledger sent a photographer and was told gently to leave their camera at the door. "House rule," Imani said, pointing at the sign she'd taped to the glass. "No photos, no exceptions. See the person, not the picture." The photographer surprised them both by nodding and picking up a paint roller. At dusk, they returned to the river house with a pizza grease stain on the back seat and paint under their nails. The air had that spring trick of smelling like rain and stone. In the family room, the mirror tiles caught the last of the light and threw it back in squares on the ceiling. Miles, worked out and fed, stood with both hands on the low ottoman, a frown of concentration creasing his small brow. "Look at you, sir," Imani said, dropping to a crouch a few feet away. "Big decision." Cole knelt on the other side, palms open, not reaching. Margot stood behind Imani, hands clasped like a prayer that didn't require a god. The room went very quiet, the way rooms do before something inevitable and miraculous. Miles lifted one hand, wobbled, reconsidered, lifted it again. His knees trembled. He stepped into air and found a floor where none had been. One step to Imani, soft as a whisper, hands thudding into her collarbone. She laughed and then caught the second step to his father, a tiny arc like a bridge. Cole's hands closed without grabbing, just there, a place to land. Miles smacked his father's chest with satisfaction, then turned toward Margot and tried a third. He fell, brave and clumsy, and Margot's knee took the bump like a field built for exactly that. No one reached for a phone. They let the moment live unrecorded in the only place moments belong, inside the people who make them. Somewhere under the floor, the river kept moving. Above it, a house that had once echoed learned to hold sound. They ate late at the island, 3 adults who had not planned to be a village and a child who did not care how the village formed so long as it did. After dishes, after the bear and the frog and the duck and the poem as steady as breath, Cole set the baby down with the practiced hush of a man who finally understood that love is a schedule and a choice. He closed the door to its exact usual stop and didn't linger. In the hallway he turned to Imani. "Tomorrow," he said. The word no longer a wish, but a plan. "Tomorrow," she agreed, slipping her binder into her backpack, boundaries clipped to the front like a badge. Margot put her palm against the library doorframe as she had the day before. They bless this house gesture she'd pretend wasn't one. Nora would be pleased, she said, choosing the only word she could say without breaking. She looked at Imani with something that wasn't quite a smile and wasn't quite a test. "Don't let him skip bedtime for board calls." "I won't," Imani said, and Cole raised a hand like a man taking an oath. They turned out lights. The monitor's green dot blinked on and on, steady as a lighthouse. Outside, the river took the day and made space for the next. Inside, the place that had been a museum was now what it had needed to be all along. A home where a boy could learn to stand, a grandmother could audit with love, a father could learn breath by breath, and a caregiver could keep her wages and her boundaries and her name on the door.